Chatty Hosts. Welcome back to yet another episode of Chatty Hosts. And today's topic I'm really excited about. It is acknowledging our own strengths, right? So basically, when I thought of this, I was just like, we tend to get looked down on for just allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. When you're vulnerable, people automatically see that as a weakness. And I just wanted to highlight how, as individuals, we're different. Solely because of our upbringing, our races, our cultures, our religion, as well as our upbringing, right? Like, those factors can determine how you interact, how you engage, and how you react to certain situations. How you would react to something might be completely different to how I react to something. And this is all based on everything that I've mentioned prior. Like, my definition of love could be different because maybe how I was shown love when I was young was very different from how Austin was shown love or how Karma was shown love. And therefore, I think it's very important to take into acknowledgement that when dealing with individuals and they react a specific way, it's not necessarily about you or where you should be upset and be like, oh, but you don't know how to do this, or is it me that you're trying to be mean towards? Just sit down and think, that person is a different past, and how they were raised to express or feel about particular things are definitely going to differ from how you see things. Yeah. And that is one thing that I'd like to bring into light, that instead of playing the victim, understand where the other person comes from.
I love that. Yes, that is beautiful.
Thank you.
And especially just not taking it personally. You know, I love what you brought up there with that whole, like, it's not on you. It's in the minute we're able to be like, you know, to bring in that empathy, to be like, you know, maybe his background or her background was quite different to mine, and now I need to just be aware of that when interacting with this person. Yeah, because that actually, put me in a spot. Yeah.
I love that, actually, and it's so true. I find that personally in my own healing process, I see or I reflect or have reflected on how I used to behave as now, and I noticed that once I was able to acknowledge my humanness and other people's humanness and upbringing and our conditioning, I was able to approach my situations with compassion. So instead of being like, why are you treating me that way, or why did you say that, I go, oh, if you reacted that way, I can't imagine what you're dealing with or the conditioning behind that. So yeah, it's beautiful. It's that shift from like, it's me to it's love. Yeah. I think is nice. And
also, I remember the last time we spoke, instead of what is wrong with you, what happened to you.
Yeah.
That is literally just it. And also, I think what's important in relation, any form of relation, whether it's platonic, and so I would always, all of us would advocate for communication, because when you communicate and you get comfortable and vulnerable, which could be seen as a weakness, it helps people understand you better. Yeah. For example, if the dark used to freak you out when you were younger, and you communicate that to your partner or your friend, they'll know not to switch off the light because it will traumatize you back into your past. So communicate about your fears, your traumas, so that when you have a complete breakdown, people don't be like, okay, you're just throwing tantrum.
Yes.
It's because it's, what's that word? PTSD. Post-traumatic disorder, right?
Yeah, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Stress disorder, there we go.
Just to clarify, that is an extreme version.
Yeah.
So that's like a medical term. So post-traumatic stress disorder is often confused with BPD, which is borderline personality. So it's a fractured personality. Whereas what you're more referring to is a trigger. So the things from our past that trigger us into either regression or just reliving that behavior conditioning. So for instance, as a kid, every time you get an ice cream, you go, oh, ice cream! Then as an adult, every time you get an ice cream, you go, oh, ice cream! That's programmed. Like conditioning behavior.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
No, I think that's a very, very beautiful way to put it there. I like that.
And I also like to say, we have to, when we're communicating ourselves to people, it's also we have to be aware of the tone in which we're communicating. That's come up a lot for me in my journey so far. It's like, yes, communication is great, but if I communicate to you in a very aggressive way, I shouldn't expect to I shouldn't expect you to want to help me out. And that's, I think, something we just really need to just look at, is how am I communicating, and how is the person communicating back, and coming full circle, we then have to start checking, what is my environment saying about myself? And that has been something that's been speaking to me a lot this week. And I think this all comes up with the whole, your strengths. And now redefining your strengths, because, we're working from our culture, we're working from our belief systems, and now the more we get older, we start realizing certain beliefs and cultural practices are just no longer serving us, and we now need to start changing it up. That's just my little 2 cents there.
And I think that's an important point, and that does move into the whole ego versus self-love discussion, because we get so confused with these two. When we start to heal, we want to empower ourselves, but there's a difference between empowering your ego and empowering your natural state of self-love. So for clarity for our audience, let's look into these two. The ego is not a bad thing, firstly. It's not a bad thing at all. We all have egos. It's healthy to have an ego, but it depends on whether that interacts with you negatively. So your ego is the side of you that can often be triggered by your wounds or your injuries. Do correct me also if I'm wrong here.
No.
So it's sort of that side of you that wants to be as good as possible. I find it's quite similar to what you said in our last video, see the link up here, where you spoke about animalistic. So my interpretation of the ego is that animalistic sort of masculine behavior of survival. I am better, I'm stronger, I'm the best. Whereas self-love is saying you are the best. Not because someone else is lesser than you, but because you within yourself are a worthy person. So we have this whole hierarchy. Ego sees the hierarchy. Self-love says there is no hierarchy. You as a person, regardless of your values, successes, or anything, are worthy as that singular. So moving from that state of ego to self-love, you're able to then see everything about you as a strength. Your entire existence, you are a strength. And your ability to stand in that is strength.
No, absolutely, and I just want to touch up there, especially like you said, ego isn't bad, and self-love, we've got to have that balance, and I liked what you said there. So ego kind of gives us, why we have to be careful not to completely rely on ego is because with ego, we're expecting validation.
Yes.
Whereas self-love, you don't need it. And it's not like, I don't need it, as Karma said. Self-love is like, you already know within that you're enough. Whereas ego, you're constantly trying to prove to the world that you're enough. And that's why it's important that we just got to catch ourselves less in that world of ego and more in, I am enough, And I think that kind of steps in with what I'm wanting to share there. We've got to understand everything that we're saying here, and I think just for the viewers, this isn't easy work, okay? like
Petrified.
This is not something that you can just get in a day and then all of a sudden, it's going to be a process. You're going to unlearn certain behaviors that you used to have, in your childhood, that was normal. And then of course you've got friends now, and your support system is going to change, and you're going to develop, you're going to become better. We all do.
I think
if we choose to.
Sorry, I like what you just said, that you've got friends, it's one thing to be the child in your family and you're raised a specific way, and that was always the way to life or the norm. And then you get out of that pattern, as you said, you have friends, you enter relationships, it's a whole switch
Completely.
where you're seeing someone or dating someone and they teaching you a different form of love in comparison of what you used to receive. Now it's a whole process of unlearning what you used to know. And I genuinely am absolutely in love with my process of unlearning what I thought was correct or the right way to live.
Same.
Let's just all unlearn.
I would like to just add something in there that I think is quite important. Exactly what you said. And I've always viewed it from a young age like this. When we live with our parents, we are not entirely our own person.
100%.
We are the outcome of conditioning.
We're actually...
To a point.
But that's... Okay, I just want to definitely put that in there. Like, from a psychology point of view, we have to see our parents as higher.
Respect.
That's how we
Naturally.
survive.
Obey.
Yeah.
Like, let's
Oh my
face
God.
it, that's how you
We are
survive.
young.
But then when you get older, this is where it does get hard, because then you start to actually question the value systems, and you're like, wait, this is actually not helpful.
But exactly that. So it's until you leave the house at any point when that happens, or in not necessarily leaving the house like moving out, but once you integrate into your own environment via someone else's environment, you're given the opportunity suddenly to be like, oh, there are the things, there are people, places, thought patterns, things, and you get to then say what is serving me and not serving me, which is really exciting. I love doing that. It's a lot of fun.
Because you basically start to empower yourself, and you then create your own identity, your own... Look, you've always had an identity, but your identity does become more solidified because now you're actually creating it. And I think just coming back to that one point I'm trying to make, so of course with our behaviors that we're going to see that were maybe limiting, we're going to want to start to change it. But I just want to speak to those out there. When the old behavior comes back, in maybe through anger or a stressful situation, you need to just create this ability or this notion to just have patience and a sense of positive self-talk with yourself when this behavior comes up again. Because that happened to me this week, and let me tell you, it's important to know that when an old behavior comes up, it's actually a good thing. Because now that's time for you to question it again and say, this is not going to be me anymore. And the more we're able to say that, it starts to eventually fade away and you replace it with something better. If that's making sense, I hope. Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is that when the old patterns or the old behavior come back, it's okay to sit down and not naturally react to it with anger, but to acknowledge it, because acknowledging it means that you are aware and that you're on the process of moving on. Because acknowledging it without anger means that you're now fully healing, right? Is that what you're trying to say? Because I'm just trying to understand.
No, absolutely, that is it. That is that. Well done. That is perfectly summarized and paraphrased. It's being able to acknowledge our humanness. I think that's important. Yeah.
And also, just if you're not there yet, that is okay. That is
Yeah.
part of the process. So it's the last step is not, oh, I didn't do it. The last step is actually, oh, it came back and I decided that no longer serves me. And I've now got a better way that I want to do it.
Amen. Yeah.
That's powerful.
That is kind of powerful.
But you also, and just to say that, like, just be aware that anger might come up, frustration, you know, but just you've got to then have that comes back to that whole self-talk we spoke about, the words we say. You know, just be like, hey, I'm still getting there.
Yeah.
With the anger thing, I think it's quite important for us to realize that anger is a secondary feeling.
Secondary emotion. Yes.
You need to be able to acknowledge that you're not just angry. I'm angry because karma. Well, let me not even say angry. I'm bummed or I'm disappointed that karma didn't show up for our coffee date. And that's why I'm feeling these emotions. And that's why it led up to anger. Don't just allow anger to take over you. Pause and then see, evaluate why you're feeling that way. You're totally allowed to be sad, disappointed, What other emotions
But
are
it's
there?
more we don't feel like we're allowed to be sad. Anger feels like a powerful emotion, but it's an easy emotion.
It's an easy,
Yeah.
I can
exactly.
easily just say it's you, it's your fault, I won't acknowledge this, I can't.
Mm.
But saying, you know what, Orst, you hurt me.
Mm.
Your actions, they didn't make me feel good
Mhm.
or loved.
Mm.
Mm.
And that, I think, is the difficult part. So it's not about the emotion, it's about the fact that if you acknowledge that other emotion, you are acknowledging that you were vulnerable.
Yes,
And
people don't
that
want to
is
be vulnerable.
difficult.
Yes,
And it takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable.
exactly.
It really does.
It does.
And I think, as you said, like, it takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable, and that's why people would always run or alternate to anger, because it's so much easier to just rage off about things, to just have all these heavy emotions, because guess what? That's how we've been programmed. If you're angry, that's a defense mechanism. People are going to be furious to be around you. Now everyone wants to beg you, oh my God, she's angry. What can we do? You're actually trying to find self-pity in that moment, instead of just looking at what you're feeling heads on and acknowledging that kind of sucked. I am sad. If you want to cry about it, please do, and allow yourself to feel so you can move, because honestly, why would you just invest so much of your energy in anger instead of coming back to self-love and being kind to yourself?
Absolutely.